In the dusty town of Red Gulch, nestled between the jagged peaks of the Sierra Nevada and the endless sprawl of the Nevada desert, the year was 1875. The sun hung low like a blood-orange lantern, casting long shadows over the wooden facade of saloons and mercantiles. Inside the Rusty Spur Saloon, the air was thick with the stench of whiskey, cigar smoke, and desperation. Tables groaned under the weight of empty bottles, and the flickering oil lamps illuminated faces etched with hardship. Elara Thompson sat in the corner, her hands trembling as she clutched the frayed hem of her faded calico dress. At 25, she was a vision of quiet beauty. Chestnut hair tied in a loose braid, hazel eyes that held the sorrow of a life unlived. Her husband, Jedediah Thompson, a gaunt man with a perpetual scowl and a gambler's itch, slumped at the poker table across the room. He'd drag her here tonight, promising it would be the last time. One big win, darling, and we'll be set, he'd slurred. But Elara knew better. Jed's debts had piled up like tumbleweeds in a storm, and tonight the stakes were higher than ever. The game was fierce. 5 men huddled around the table. A grizzled miner, a slick card sharp from San Francisco, the town sheriff nursing a grudge, and a mysterious stranger who'd ridden in that afternoon. The stranger was tall, broad-shouldered, with a weathered face framed by a black Stetson and a salt-and-pepper beard. His name was Harlan Crow, a lone rancher from the High Plains, known for his herd of cattle and his solitary ways. He rarely spoke, but his steel-blue eyes missed nothing. Jed slapped down his cards with a triumphant grin. Full house, boys. Aces over kings. The miner groaned and folded. The card sharp cursed under his breath, and the sheriff eyed Jed suspiciously. But Harlan just nodded, his expression unreadable. "Reckon that's a fine hand," he drawled, his voice like gravel under boots. "But I ain't out yet." The pot grew. Gold coins, a deed to a worthless claim, even a silver pocket watch. Jed, emboldened by his luck, pushed further. "I'm all in," he declared, shoving his last chips forward. But he had nothing left, except Elara. His eyes flicked to her, and a cruel smile twisted his lips. "Tell you what, if I lose, you can have my wife. She's a fine cook, keeps a clean house, worth more than any gold nugget." The room fell silent. Elara's heart hammered in her chest. "Jed, no!" she whispered, rising to her feet. But he waved her off, laughing it off as a joke. The other players shifted uncomfortably, but Harlan leaned back, studying Jed with cold intensity. "You sure about that, Thompson? A woman's no poker chip." Jed sneered. "She's mine to wager. Call or fold." Harlan met Elara's gaze across the room. In that moment, something unspoken passed between them, a flicker of pity, perhaps, or recognition of shared loneliness. He nodded slowly. "Call." The cards flipped. Jed's full house crumbled against Harlan's straight flush. The saloon erupted in murmurs. Jed's face drained of color. You cheated," he stammered, but the sheriff shook his head. "Fair game, Jed. You lost." Elara felt the world tilt. Jed grabbed her arm roughly, pulling her toward Harlan. "Take her, then. She's yours." Tears stung her eyes as he shoved her forward, then stormed out into the night, leaving her alone with strangers. Harlan stood, his chair scraping the floor. He approached Elara gently, like one might a skittish horse. "Ma'am, I ain't in the business of buying folks. You don't have to come with me." But where else could she go? Penniless, abandoned in a frontier town rife with dangers for a woman alone. I have no choice," she murmured, her voice breaking. Harlan sighed, tipping his hat. "Then let's get you out of here. My ranch is a day's ride north. Name's Harlan Crow." The journey to Harlan's ranch was a blur of dust and silence. They rode double on a sturdy bay mare, Elara perched side saddle in front, her body tense against his. The landscape shifted from barren flats to rolling hills dotted with sagebrush and distant cattle herds. Harlan spoke little, but when he did, his words were kind. "Ain't much, my spread. Just me and a few hands. Lost my wife to fever 5 years back. Been alone since." Elara glanced up at him, surprised by the vulnerability in his tone. "I'm sorry. Jed, he wasn't always like this." The gambling changed him. Harlan grunted. A man's choices define him. You deserve better. As dusk fell, they arrived at the ranch, a modest log cabin flanked by a bar and corrals. The air smelled of pine and fresh earth. Harlan helped her down, his hand strong but gentle on her waist. Inside, the cabin was sparse. A stone fireplace, a worn table, a single bed in the corner. You take the bed, he said. I'll bunk in the barn. That night, Elara lay awake, staring at the rafters. Freedom tasted bittersweet. Harlan had paid Jed's debt in full. $50 wired the saloon owner. But what did that make her? A servant? A obligation? Yet in his eyes, she saw no possession, only quiet respect. The next morning dawned crisp and golden. Elara rose early, determined to earn her keep. She found Harlan in the barn, mending a saddle. I'll cook breakfast, she offered. He nodded, and soon the aroma of biscuits and coffee filled the air. Over the following weeks, a routine emerged. Elara tended the garden, mended clothes, and cooked meals that drew Harlan in from the fields earlier each day. He taught her to ride properly, his hand steadying hers on the reins. Easy now. Feel the horse's rhythm, he'd say, his breath warm against her ear. Laughter crept into their conversations. Stories of his youth herding cattle across the plains, her tales of growing up in a Missouri farmstead before Jed swept her away with empty promises. But shadows lingered. Jed's absence gnawed at Elara. Rumors reached the ranch that he'd skipped town, owing more debts. One evening, as they sat by the fire, Harlan noticed her distant gaze. You miss him? He asked softly. She shook her head. Not him. The idea of what we could have been. But here, it's peaceful. Thank you, Harlan. He reached across, his callous fingers brushing hers. Ain't nothing. You brighten this place. Tension built like a gathering storm. One afternoon, while riding the fence line, a rattlesnake spooked Elara's horse. She tumbled into the dirt, the snake coiling to strike. Harlan leaped from his mount, drawing his revolver in a blur. A single shot echoed, the snake's head exploding in a spray of dust. He knelt beside her, his hands checking for injuries. You all right? His voice was rough with fear. Elara nodded, her heart racing not from the fall, but from his proximity. Their eyes locked, and for the first time she saw the depth of his longing. Harlan, she whispered. He pulled away abruptly. Can't do this. You came here cause of debt. I won't take advantage. But that night, under a canopy of stars, Elara found him on the porch, pipe in hand. It's not advantage, she said, sitting beside him. You've given me freedom. And more. He turned to her, the moonlight etching lines of vulnerability on his face. Elara, I've been alone so long, afraid to feel again. She took his hand. Then let's be afraid together. Their first kiss was tentative, like the first rain after drought, soft, then deepening with pent-up emotion. Harlan's arms enveloped her, strong and sure, erasing the ghosts of Jed's indifference. Yet, peace was fleeting. Weeks later, a rider arrived at the ranch, Jed, disheveled and drunk, with two rough companions. She's my wife, he bellowed, dismounting unsteadily. You stole her, Crow. Harlan stepped out, rifle in hand. She ain't property, Thompson. You lost her fair and square. Now, get. Jed laughed maniacally. I got friends. We'll take her back, and your cattle for good measure. Elara emerged from the cabin, her chin high. I'm not going, Jed. It's over. The confrontation escalated. Jed's men drew pistols, but Harlan was faster. Shots rang out in the yard. One man fell clutching his leg, the other fled. Jed charged at Harlan, knife gleaming. They grappled in the dirt, fists flying. Elara grabbed a shovel, swinging it at Jed's back with a resounding thud. He crumpled, groaning. The sheriff arrived soon after, summoned by the gunfire. Thompson, you're under arrest for rustling attempts and assault. As Jed was hauled away in irons, he spat at Elara. You'll regret this. But she felt only relief. That night, as Harlan bandaged a cut on his knuckles, she confessed her fears. What if he comes back? He won't. Harlan assured her, pulling her close. And if he does, we'll face it together. Months turned to seasons. The ranch flourished under their shared efforts. Cattle herds grew, a new barn rose, and Alara's garden bloomed with wildflowers. Their love deepened, unspoken at first, then declared in quiet moments. One crisp autumn evening, by the river where willows whispered secrets, Harlan knelt on one knee. "Alara, I didn't buy you that night, but if you'll have me, I'll spend my life earning your heart." Tears streamed down her face as she nodded. "You've already claimed it, Harlan." "Yes." They married under a vast blue sky, the town preacher officiating before a gathering of ranch hands and neighbors. Alara wore a simple white dress she'd sewn herself, Harlan in his best vest. As they exchanged vows, the wind carried the scent of sage, a promise of new beginnings. Years later, with children laughing in the yard and the ranch a beacon prosperity, Alara would reflect on that fateful poker game. What began as a debt became a destiny. Harlan had paid with coin, but claimed her with kindness, turning chains into cherished bonds. In the wild heart of the West, love had won the ultimate hand.